The dress still had the smell of that banquet hall when I threw it in the trash the next morning. I didn't wash it. I didn't fold it. I just opened the bin under the kitchen sink and dropped it straight in, and then I stood there for a second looking at the fabric bundled at the bottom, like something that needed to be buried. 7 years. That's how long I had been part of that family. 7 years of dinners where I refilled glasses before anyone asked. 7 years of laughing at jokes I didn't find funny. 7 years of calling a man Dad, who looked at me like I was a coat rack someone had left in his house by mistake. My name is Renee. And the night I'm about to tell you about is the night I finally understood something I had been refusing to believe. The banquet hall was his family's idea. 600 people, gold centerpieces, a live band. My husband Marcus said it was to celebrate 10 years of marriage, but honestly, looking back, I think it was always meant to be a stage. I remember fixing my earring in the car mirror right before we walked in. Marcus didn't look at me once the whole drive there. I noticed. I just didn't say anything yet. The dinner started at 7. Marcus's father, everyone called him Big Ray, was already at the head table when we arrived. He had that way of sitting where he took up more space than the chair gave him. Elbows out. Jacket open. Like the room had been built around him specifically. He looked at me when we walked in, and then looked away. No greeting. No nod. Just that familiar slide of the eyes that said I had been seen and immediately dismissed. I had learned not to flinch at that years ago. Marcus went straight to his father, and they embraced like they hadn't seen each other in months. It had been 11 days. I know because I was there for the last visit too, standing in that same kitchen, cutting fruit nobody asked me to cut, just to have something to do with my hands. Our marriage had a sound by that point. It was the sound of me filling silence. We had met at 26. He was warm then. Attentive. The kind of man who texted to say he was thinking about you for no reason. Somewhere around year 4 that stopped. I told myself it was stress. Work. His father's health scare in 2019. I gave every behavior an explanation because that felt kinder than the alternative. But explanations have a shelf life. And that night in the banquet hall, I was about to watch mine expire. Big Ray started drinking early. I watched him from across the table. 3rd glass of whiskey before the salad course even arrived. His voice getting louder in that specific way it did, not sloppy, just expanded. Like the alcohol gave him permission to be more of whatever he already was. Marcus's aunt leaned over and whispered something to him, and he laughed. A real laugh. Shoulders shaking. I smiled because people were watching. Around 8:30, Big Ray started talking about the early years of Marcus's life. Stories I had heard before. Football trophies. Scholarship offers. The year Marcus almost went pro before his knee gave out. Every story had the same shape. Marcus at the center, larger than life. And somewhere in the background, a woman who wasn't me. His mother.
Sandra.
Sandra had passed 6 years ago. I never met her. But in that family, her absence was a presence. And somehow, without anyone ever saying it directly, I had spent 7 years being compared to a woman I never got the chance to know. Big Ray set his glass down and looked at me for the first time all evening. He said my chicken was probably better than the food here.
People laughed.
I smiled again. But the way he said it wasn't a compliment. The way he said it was a door opening. And I should have recognized what was about to walk through it. He started small. A comment about the centerpieces, had I picked them? Because Sandra would have chosen something more classic. Just an observation. Just conversation. Someone changed the subject. Big Ray let it go. Then 20 minutes later, another one. He mentioned that Marcus had lost weight recently. Said it with concern in his voice, like a caring father. Then added that a wife should probably notice things like that. I kept my face still. Marcus said nothing. The band started playing around 9. Couples moved to the floor. Marcus went to speak to someone from his job and left me sitting at the table with his father and 3 aunts I barely knew. That was when Big Ray leaned forward. He said, and I remember every word, that Marcus deserved someone who understood where he came from. Someone who fit. He said some women marry into a family and grow into it, and some women, no matter how many years pass, just never quite belong. He was smiling when he said it. The aunts went quiet. I looked at him. I set my water glass down. And I said, calmly, that I had spent 7 years belonging to a family that never made space for me, and that maybe the problem was never mine to fix. 600 people didn't hear that part. But Marcus did. He had walked back to the table without me noticing. And before I could take another breath, I felt it. The sound was what I remember first. Not pain.
Sound.
A flat, sharp crack that cut straight through the band music and the table conversation and the clinking of glasses. And then a half-second of complete silence where the whole room seemed to inhale at once. My face turned to the left from the force of it. I stood there for a moment with my hand not quite raised to my cheek, my mind doing that strange thing where it refuses to process what just happened because the alternative is too large to hold. Marcus's voice came from somewhere behind the ringing in my ear. He said I had disrespected his father. He said it quietly, like a correction, like I had used the wrong fork. And then the laughter started. Not everyone, but enough. A ripple moving through the closest tables, a few people looking away, a few leaning in to whisper. Big Ray picked up his glass. One of the aunts cleared her throat. I looked at Marcus. He was already looking somewhere else. I picked up my clutch from the table. I didn't say a word. I didn't cry. I walked through that room with 600 people watching me, and I kept my back straight and my pace even, and I pushed through the side door into the parking corridor alone.
The door closed behind me.
And for 30 seconds, I just stood there breathing. Then I took out my phone. My father picked up on the second ring. I didn't explain everything.
I didn't have to.
I just said his name, and something in my voice must have told him exactly what kind of night it had been because he said he was already getting his keys. My dad is not a loud man. He never has been. He's the kind of person who shows up and doesn't ask too many questions and just stands next to you until you're ready to talk. I have never in my life been more grateful for that quality than I was standing in that corridor with the bass from the band still vibrating through the wall behind me. He arrived in 22 minutes. I was sitting on a bench near the valet station when his headlights came around the corner. He parked crooked. He always parks crooked.
I almost smiled at that.
He didn't hug me right away. He just sat down next to me and looked at my face, and his jaw tightened once, and then he was still. He asked me one question. He said, "What do you want to do?" Not what happened. Not who did this. Not I'm going to handle it. Just what do you want to do? I sat with that for a moment. 7 years of making myself smaller. 7 years of refilling glasses and swallowing comments and explaining away behavior that never deserved an explanation. I told him I wanted to go home. And then I told him the other thing. I called my cousin Dana the next morning. Dana is a family attorney. Has been for 14 years. I had never called her in a professional capacity before because I had spent 7 years believing I was building something worth protecting. She picked up before 8. I told her to bring her notepad. She stayed for 3 hours. We sat at my kitchen table and I walked her through everything I could remember. Not just the night of the anniversary. Everything. The comments over the years. The way Marcus had slowly moved money into a personal account I didn't have visibility on. I had noticed that 8 months ago and filed it away the way I filed everything away. The joint property. The business he had started 2 years into our marriage that I had supported financially in the early months when he had nothing. Dana wrote and occasionally asked a quiet question. When I finished, she looked up and said I had more than I thought I did. I already knew that. I had spent the drive home from that banquet hall making a mental list. 7 years of mental filing cabinets, all of them suddenly unlocked. The next call I made was to a photographer friend. I needed documentation of my face. Dated.
Time-stamped.
After that, I called my bank. Marcus came home that evening like a man who expected things to have cooled down. He walked in, set his keys on the counter, and looked at me with that particular expression that said he was prepared to accept an apology. I was on the phone with Dana again. The divorce papers were filed on a Tuesday. Dana handled the service personally. Not mailed. Not left at the door. Delivered to Marcus at his desk at 11 in the morning, in front of the 2 colleagues he had spent 7 years impressing. She understood that some things need a witness. Marcus worked in hospital administration. Morality clauses in his contract. Language about behavior that reflects on the institution. I submitted the dated photographs to HR on a Thursday and went back to work and waited the way I had always waited, quietly, without showing my hand. Within 3 weeks, he had been reassigned. No announcement, just a title change and a new office on a floor where decisions are not made. That consequence lives permanently in the pause before a man says what he does at a party. In the way the sentence ends a little too quickly, that pause will follow him. Big Ray stopped calling. I heard through Marcus's sister that something had shifted around him at family dinners. Some invisible authority that had always held simply because no one had ever refused it. 600 people saw what happened that night. They don't forget. They just wait until it's safe to remember. The settlement took 4 months. I got the house. What I also kept was my name, my father's number and my recent calls, and the memory of walking out of that hall with 600 people watching and not one of them understanding what they were actually seeing. They were not watching a woman fall apart. They were watching a woman make a decision.